If you have an addict or an alcoholic in your life, chances are you're angry, frustrated, worried, scared, a lot of emotions. We totally understand. We've worked with a lot of families going through the same thing that you're going through right now. You want them to get help. You would love for them to not have this addiction, but you don't know what to do. This is why we put together Family Reconnect. This is a program that is designed to put you first. Ultimately, if you help yourself, you can help them. In this, we're going to teach you how to set appropriate boundaries. We're going to teach you how to communicate effectively. We're going to teach you how to go into situations with your addict loved one that is going to be effective. A lot of times, family members and loved ones, they act out of emotion. We get that, we understand. But all that does is make it worse. You need people to come alongside you that can walk this journey with you. So starting on June 3rd, we are going live. We want you to be a part of this community. Because remember, you didn't cause this. You can't cure it, and you definitely can't control it. So June 3rd is when we're going live. You can find all the information at realrecoverytalk.com/FRC. Again, it's realrecoverytalk.com/FRC. We're excited to go on this journey with you, and we'll see you on June 3rd. Hey everyone, thank you for being here. This is week 4 of the Big Book Study. We're covering the second half of Bill's story. The first 3 weeks have gone absolutely amazing. Eric is doing a phenomenal job. Hey, listen, I want to thank you for being here. It's very important that you guys participate, take notes, and just interact with us in whatever way you feel comfortable. And share this with people. If they want to participate, they can go to realrecoverytalk.com/bigbookstudy. All they have to do is put their email in and they can register. They'll get all the recordings. They can join us live. Yeah, and that's it. So here we are, week 4, second half of Bill's story. Here we go.
Hey guys, welcome back. Anybody new? Welcome to this book study. Let's go ahead and get focused first with the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right, so we're halfway through Bill's story, and last week we saw his meteoric rise and fall from grace, right? We saw him become a high roller on Wall Street, come from very little to having everything, and then we saw that crushing fall from alcoholism. And where he found himself, we're going to read the last paragraph of what we read last week, just kind of like a preview, like they do on TV when they show you what happened the week before. So we're on page 8. And he's gotten it from the doctor that he's going to die. He's going to have to be, if he doesn't stop drinking, he's going to have to go away to the asylum, be shut up, or he's just going to die an alcoholic death. And so he says, trembling, I stepped from the hospital, a broken man. Fear sobered me a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink. And on Armistice Day, 1934, and Armistice Day was the celebratory day for the ending of World War I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch. I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. And last week I got emotional when I talked about that. I explained why I got emotional. And so now here we are. We're going to find out how Bill recovered. Near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. With a certain satisfaction, I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through the night and the next day. My wife was at work. I wondered whether I dared hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. He was sober. It was years since I could remember him coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he had escaped. Of course, he would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him, unmindful of his welfare. I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility, the very thing, an oasis. Drinkers are like that. And so he's talking about Ebby Thatcher, and Ebby Thatcher was his school friend. He was a friend of his all his life. And Ebby Thatcher was as bad of an alcoholic as Bill was, if not worse. And Bill knew this. And this is where the idea came. This is where he figured out that, hey, one alcoholic to another, no one can get my attention the way that Ebby did. And the reason for that is because Bill knew that Ebby drank the way he did. Bill had spent his adult life getting drunk with Ebby. He knew this. They were talking about that time that they completed a jag. Ebby Thatcher came from a very wealthy family up in Connecticut or something. I forget exactly where it was from. His father had actually run for president at one point, but he was the mayor of some town up there. And they got drunk and rented an airplane, and they flew into this town. And the story, the way that I understand it, it went was the town got word that Ebby and his friend were coming to town on a plane. And back then you had landing fields and not airports, right? Flight was a new thing. And they landed in this field, and the marching band was there, and everybody was there from the town. And here comes Bill and Ebby falling off that plane, just drunker than drunk. And it became a really big scandal in that town. And that's what he's talking about here when he says there was a time that we had chartered an airplane to complete that jag. He's just looking to recapture those old times with his buddies and laugh about it. And here's Ebby sitting there, and this is what he's come to Bill's house, and this is what Bill's thinking. Okay, this is going to be a reprieve. I'm going to get to talk to my friend and drink with my friend. The door opened, and he stood there fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? So immediately Bill sees, hey, this isn't the same guy. Something's different about this guy. I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had gotten into the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come, what's all this about? I queried. He looked straight at me, simply but smiling. He said, I've got religion. Now that would scare me as an alcoholic. You look at me and tell me I got religion, I'd tell you probably get out of my house. Back then, like when I first got sober, not today. So, come, what's all this about? I queried. He looked straight at me, simply but smiling. He said, I've got religion. I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right, but bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. So Bill doesn't care. Go ahead and tell me what you're going to tell me. It's more gin for me. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how two men had appeared in court persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. And so he's talking about the Oxford group and the Oxford movement, which was an early 20th century Christian movement that had four absolutes, it was called. It was like 6 principles. So there are 6 steps, and that is where our 12 steps come from. Bill W. took those 6 steps, turned them into 12. But at the time, it was 6 steps, and it was just a Christian movement. And these guys showed up for Ebby when he was going to prison, and they said, hey, let us work with him and bring him into our Oxford group, and they got him sober. So he's telling Bill about this. It was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident work. He had come to pass his experience along to me if I cared to have it. I was shocked, but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays way over there on the hillside. There was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed. And a proffered temperance proffered just means offered. But a temperance pledge was back in early 20th century, late 19th century. The women the church women would make you sign a temperance pledge, which was you would pledge not to drink, is what it was. And this had been offered to Bill, and he had refused to sign it. And he's thinking of this stuff, there was that proffered temperance pledge I had never signed. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings, his insistence that the spheres, meaning the planets and the galaxy, really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen, his fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. So he's thinking about all the time he spent with his grandfather and how his grandfather, his grandfather believed in God. He believed that the universe has its a way about it. He believed in something greater than himself, like we would say a power greater than himself. But he did not believe, and he did not side with organized religion. He just didn't think the preacher should tell him how he has to believe. That's what Bill's remembering here as Ebby's sitting here talking to him about God. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back. And if we go back to the beginning of Bill's story, he tells us he spent that day in Winchester Cathedral where he felt the presence of God when he really humbly wanted him. He says, I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are, for that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggest vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. How could there be so much of a precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe a spirit of the universe who knew neither time nor limitation. But that was as far as I had gone. So Bill W. is saying that, hey, he sees this immutable law, right, of the universe. If this happens, this happens. This has to happen for this to happen. Science, biology, he understands this, and he believes that something created this. There can't be a law without a creator of the law. This is what Bill's saying. So he believes in some type of God, right? He believes in a creator, let's say, but that was as far as he had gotten. With ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me who was love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. So here you could say that Bill's agnostic, right? Because all agnostic, and we're going to get into a chapter called We Agnostic, all agnostic means is without knowledge. So an agnostic is without knowledge of God, right? And Bill believes in a God, but and this is akin to me when I came in here. I believed in a God. I believed in God, but I couldn't see. I was without knowledge of how God had ever worked in my life. I had stood on my own 2 feet all my life. I had never relied on God. I was completely without knowledge of how that had ever worked. And that's pretty much Bill right here. He believes in God, but he doesn't believe in religion, basically. To Christ, I conceded the certainty of a great man not too closely followed by those who claimed him. His moral teaching most excellent. For myself, I adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I discarded. The wars which had been fought, the burnings and chicanery that religious dispute had facilitated, and chicanery just means lies and trickery. The wars that religious dispute had facilitated made me sick. I honestly doubted whether on balance the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I had seen in Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible, the brotherhood of man a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed the boss universal, and he certainly had me. So Bill's describing, he saw things over in Europe. He saw guys coming back from the front lines of World War I, a horrific war. And how can there be a God that does this? And this is the battle he's going on in his mind, in his kitchen, while Abby Thatcher is trying to tell him about God. But my friend sat before me and he made the point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Had this power originated in him? Obviously, it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that moment, and that was none at all. So this is where one alcoholic to another, that one sober alcoholic is living proof to the newcomer. That's when I came in, that was a power greater than me, was that one sober alcoholic. I don't care if it was, 6 decades, 6 years, 6 months. I couldn't stay sober for 6 minutes. How'd you do that? That's what I came to believe in before I developed my relationship with God. Was I believed this guy drank the way that I did. I believed he had ruined his life the way I did. My power greater than myself started there. That floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings. Remember, here's a miracle because, again, Bill W. knows who Ebby is. He knows how he drank. He knows the way he burned his life down. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped a new soil. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges of my old prejudice. And we're going to get into this as the book goes on. And when they use the word prejudice here, they just mean old ideas. At every time that you see the word prejudice, you just insert old ideas right there, and it'll be a lot more palpable to you, I think, than the word prejudice. So what he's saying is, despite the living example of my friend, there remain in me the vestiges of my old ideas. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence, universal mind, or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. I'm going to stop right here, because here you're about to see Bill W.'s spiritual experience. It's right here, written in this book, and we're about to see it, right? And the purpose of this book is to affect a spiritual experience significant enough to bring about a complete psychic change. Psychic change is an improved shift in thought and behavior. You're about to see that here, all right? My friend suggested then what seemed a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? Brilliant. I'm an alcoholic, man. I've never had a problem with my own conception of anything. You're going to tell me now I can have my own conception? I'm all in now, right? So here's Bill and Ebby in Bill's kitchen, and I can picture they're arguing back and forth about what God is, and Ebby's, it's a Christian movement, so Ebby's, I'm sure, talking to him about Jesus, and they're going back and forth, and Ebby's telling him this is God, and then you have to believe this, and Bill's going back at him going, I know, but I don't believe that. I believe this. And they're arguing about what God is. And then finally, Ebby just says, hey, man, what difference does it make? Choose your own conception of God. But there's a God. It's our creator, whatever you want it to be. Just choose your own conception. It doesn't make any difference on the mission that we're on this great endeavor that we are on to stop drinking, to save our lives. What difference does it make? And then he goes on, and here comes his spiritual experience. That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required for me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point upon a foundation of complete willingness. So the whole foundation of recovery is that willingness to believe. And we go on later on, and when we get into the later chapters and we talk about it, that willingness is for me was I just had to stop saying, no. And I had to start saying, maybe. That's all it took to crack that door a little bit for me to let God in and to start to believe. I just had to be willing to believe. And that's what Bill's saying here. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. Thus, I was convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. At long last, I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view. This is his spiritual experience. He's undergoing that psychic change now. The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness to have him with me, and he came. But soon the sense of his presence had been blotted out by worldly clamors, mostly those within myself, and so it had been ever since. How blind I had been. At the hospital, I was separated from alcohol for the last time. Treatment seemed wise, for I showed signs of delirium tremens, so he's got the shakes. There I humbly offered myself to God, as I then understood him, to do with me as he would. So Bill W. does a third step. I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing and that without him I was lost. I ruthlessly faced my sins. So he does a fourth step. Ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my newfound friend. Friend is capitalized. He's talking about God, not Ebby Thatcher. I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my newfound friend take them away, root and branch. So he becomes willing. He does a step 6. He becomes entirely ready to have God remove him of his defects. I have not had a drink since. My schoolmate visited me and I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. He does a step 5 right there. We made a list of the people I had hurt and towards whom I felt a resentment. So he does a step 8. I expressed my entire willingness to approach these individuals, admitting my wrongs, step 9. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to right all such matters to the utmost of my ability. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. Never was I to pray for myself, except as my request bore on my usefulness to others. And that's our third step prayer. God, I offer myself to you today to build with me and do with me as you will. Relieve me of my, I've drawn a blank now, but it goes on, it says, relieve me of my burden of self so that I may better do your will. And that's what he's saying here. Never was I to pray for myself except as my request bore on my usefulness to others. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure. My friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator, that I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. Belief in the power of God, plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were essential requirements. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. And that's exactly what this program is about. It's about getting rid of our selfishness. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound, and it was there in that kitchen. We saw it. We just read about it. For a moment, I was alarmed and called my friend the doctor to ask if I were still sane. He listened in wonder as I talked. Finally, he shook his head, saying, "Something has happened to you I don't understand, but you had better hang on to it. Anything is better than the way you were." The good doctor now sees many men who have such experiences. He knows that they are real. He's talking about Dr. Silkworth here. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given to me. Perhaps I could help some of them. They, in turn, might work with others. So here he's coming up with this idea of carrying this message over and over. My friend had emphasized with the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic, and this is a very important sentence coming up here, I have it underlined and highlighted, and it's very important. People ask, this is the basis of our program, is how do I enlarge my spiritual life? How do I continue on this journey with God? And it's right here in clear letters. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, the imperative word there being self-sacrifice. Self-sacrifice for others. He could not survive the certain trials and low spots that lie ahead. He says certain trials and low spots that lie ahead. I say it all the time. Prepare yourself for sorrow. It's coming your way whether you're sober or not. It's it's working with others. It's self-sacrificing, working with other alcoholics that saves the day every time. Bill W. says it in this book time and time again. So what is that? It enlarges my spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice. Look, it doesn't say help. I can help a guy. If I'm a wealthy guy and I'm sitting in a meeting and a guy needs, $100 and I give him $100, I help that guy. Might have helped him a lot, right? But what did I sacrifice? Was it self-sacrificing? No, it wasn't. There is no more precious commodity than my time. And it's giving my time and genuinely caring about that next and giving my time working with him to sit down when I got a million other things that I want to do. And I don't want to go sit down with this guy, but that guy needs me to. And my sobriety depends on me doing that, because that's where the self-sacrifice comes in. That's where I get outside of myself. So he would not survive the certain trials and low spots that lie ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. My wife and I abandoned ourselves to the enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. It was fortunate for my old business associates to remain skeptical, and for a year and a half, during which I found little work, I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. So for a year and a half, Bill W. is plagued by self-resentment and pity. I was plagued by self-resentment and I lost my place. Remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time. I was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink, but I soon found that when all measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Year and a half, he's not well. He's waves of self-pity. Business isn't going good. He's sober, but he's in the dumps, man. And every time he goes and works with another guy, and that's what gets him out of it. And that holds true today. Throughout this book, he's going to tell us this. Many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I'd be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going. We commenced to make many fast friends, and a fellowship had grown up among us, of which it was a wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I have seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. Have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I have seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. He's talking about the first 100 now. Now he's fast forward a little bit to the fellowship and the first 100 that wrote this book. He says, I've seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. They've seen it all, and they've seen them stay sober through it all. In one Western city and its environs, there are 1,000 of us and our families. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. At these informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in numbers and power. And there's an asterisk right there, and it says in 2021, AA is composed of approximately 129,800 groups. Big difference. An alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, common, and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it. I suppose some will be shocked at our seemingly worldliness and levity, but just underneath there is deadly earnestness. Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. 24 hours a day. I don't get a break. I don't get a day off. No break from this thing. Faith has to work 24 hours through us. Service, constant thought of how I can be of service to my fellow man. There is, however, an alcohol. Where did I? Yeah, most of us feel we need look no further for utopia. We have it with us right here and now. And this sentence gets me, man. Each day, my friend's simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. How could he have known in that kitchen that day, that simple talk in Bill's kitchen has brought millions to God, has gotten millions sober, restored who knows how many families, and has created this thing that we have today. If that's not divinely inspired, I don't know what would be. It's amazing. And that's Bill's story. That's it.